I think we're good to go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very important event. My name is Athos Ioannou. I'm the president of the chamber, and I would like to thank everyone that's participating, the panel, Commissioner Michailidis for joining us, and I'd like to immediately turn it over to John Papaspanos, who has really organized the entire event and planned it and done a wonderful job. So please, John, take over and let's start the event.
Thank you so much, Athos. Welcome to all those who have joined us today from the US, Greece, and other countries for the inaugural Ecogenics event. My name is John Papaspanos, and I'm the director of the HACC Innovators within the Hellenic-American Chamber of Commerce based in New York City. We could not have hosted today's event without the collaborative efforts of the team at Ecogenia, which includes Leah Papazoglou, who will be the moderator of our panel discussion, and Ms. Marina, who is the program strategist for Ecogenia, and of course, the Chamber's Executive Director, Alexandra Mitsakis. Before we get started, we will need to address a few housekeeping items. First, please note that at this time, the program is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera. We kindly ask that everyone keep yourself muted at all times during the course of the event, unless you're asking a question. And last, at the end of the panel discussion, we're going to open the floor to questions from the audience, but please feel free to populate your questions in advance in the chat box to the side of the window. And we'll try to address as many questions as we can. Thank you all. The genesis of today's event stems from a vision to feature several leading voices on matters relating to sustainable development and the ESG movement. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance factors in both capital allocation, corporate practices, and consumer preferences. Today's discussion will focus on the business case for why sustainable development matters for companies and countries alike. While there are many challenges, there's a confluence of factors that have created a remarkable opportunity for sustainability, in large part due to governmental action and a multitude of NGOs like the European Public Law Organization and Ecogenia. Our objective is to create a platform that will promote the use of ESG factors in capital allocation and corporate practices, create synergies between individuals and organizations between our motherland of Greece and our homeland of the US. And thirdly, help develop best practices for sustainable development. And last, to generally foster business opportunities for our members and attendees. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'd like to convey a special welcome to Giorgos Michailidis, who is the head of the Greek Trade Office at the Consulate General of Greece in New York City. I kindly invite him to give a few welcoming remarks at this time. Good morning, Mr. Michailidis. Thank you for joining us.
Just one moment, please.
I'm sorry.
He's not unmuting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Giorgos. If you could.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing well during these unprecedented times we're going through. I'd like to thank the Hellenic-American Chamber for inviting me to participate in this webinar, as I believe this topic, sustainable development measures and ESG reporting and compliance, lies at the core of current trends, both on a state and on a corporate level. The reason why this is the case is because we see that both societies and governments are coming to realize that we need to follow. Hello? Yes. That we need to follow and incorporate such policies in planning, both and practices, both on a state and private sector. So I wouldn't like to take too much of your time, as this is just a welcoming remark. I would just like to say that as far as Greece is concerned, I'd like to just briefly touch upon certain aspects of this issue as we see them evolving and taking shape both on a private and on a public sector, both from the private and from the public sector perspective. From the public sector perspective, I believe that the most emblematic one is Greek government's decision to proceed with the economy's decarbonization. So to be more precise, whereas up until now, Greece is heavily dependent, not to say exclusively dependent, on lignite for electricity production, we expect that like 67% of the said energy is expected to be generated by renewable energy sources until 2030. And the Greek government is moving towards the direction of investing a large amount of funds, both from public funds and European Union funds towards this direction. So that's one thing that I would point out as as the most emblematic one on Greek state level as to why and how the Greek government is taking this aspect of policies to be sustainable development measures very seriously. On the other hand, judging from talking from the private sector perspective, I'd like to touch upon our offices, Greek trade offices experiences, the experience that we had so far during the last 5 years that I've been working in New York. And we see that Greek companies are coming to realize that, and I'm saying this because of the business requests that we get at our office, meaning Greek companies that are looking to expand their market share in the US market by exporting more or investing more in the US market. We see that they have come to realize that you cannot do business in the US or probably overall in the world if you do not apply and you do not abide by this ESG reporting and compliance procedures. And the reason is because the US society is asking for this. We're seeing that right now the US society, especially the younger generation, the so-called millennials and Gen Z, are very much concerned and very much persistent in seeing both the private sector and the government, the US government, and this is probably one of the reasons why the current Biden administration is so much focused on implementing such policies that are related to sustainable development. So they see that Greek companies see that you cannot do business in the US. You have to incorporate such measures in whatever business you want to follow on and to do in the US. We see, for example, that companies that they want to export food or beverage products to the US, they are always very much eager and very much pay a lot of attention to how they promote their their products and how they market the products into the US market, so as to make it clear to the US consumer that they are following such measures such sustainable development measures. So I wouldn't like to take any more of your time because this is just a welcoming remark. I would just like to say that I believe that with the examples that I just mentioned, that both the public and the private sector in Greece are in course with the current trend, with the sustainable development, by implementing sustainable development measures. And with this note, I'd like to stop here and give the floor again to our moderator. And of course, I'm looking forward to a great event. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much, Giorgos. We really appreciate your participation. So I think with that, we can introduce our keynote speaker for today. Over the course of many years, one of the most active and prominent advocates of sustainable development in Europe, Greece, and abroad, it has been Mr. Spyros Kouvelis. He was elected to Greek Parliament in 2007, and in 2009, he served as both the Shadow Minister of the Environment from 2007 to 2009, and as the Deputy Minister for Foreign, Economic, Cultural, and Environmental Affairs from 2009 to 2011. In the non-public sector, he is the founder and director of the Institute for Sustainable Development of the European Public Law Organization, which is dedicated to the creation of knowledge in the area of public law and governance. He is also a senior associate of the Institute for Sustainable Leadership at the University of Cambridge, where he acts as an ambassador of the program in the Eastern Mediterranean sphere and teaches several programs. Mr. Kouvelis is involved in a myriad of other groups and initiatives, including international conferences like the recent Delphi Economic Forum, and I'm only highlighting the most germane parts of his bio. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Spyros Kouvelis, live from, I believe, Greece as of now. Welcome, Spyros.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much. And first of all, before I share my presentation, I want to sincerely thank the Hellenic-American Chamber of Commerce and the HACC Innovators initiative and the work that you have done. And of course, thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts with you. I think it's a very, very important point in time and a very important initiative that you have engaged on. And it gave me a lot of reasons to think around how I would approach this matter. So I will share my presentation with you. But before that, I would also like to thank and welcome my fellow panelists and of course the audience. I see that we have a pretty good audience today, which is great. So from very hot Greece these days, I'm just sharing this presentation. I hope it all works properly. So what I will be speaking about is from Greece at 0 to Greece 2.0. And what do I mean by this is that when I started thinking about how we will be approaching this, this overview, I wanted to give some perspective because things don't happen in a vacuum. Things happen in some type of overall setup of what is happening in countries in the world and so on. And Greece has a very particular history about it on the way that things work. So let me get started by the fact that everyone is talking about the SDGs these days. Everybody's talking about sustainable development, the SDGs, and all the aspects related to sustainability, including sustainable investment that Commissioner Michailidis mentioned before. I have to say that from my experience, a lot of people are talking about, much fewer people know the ins and outs and the details of how this happens. The second very important dimension that everybody's talking about in Europe is the famous European Green Deal. What is the European Green Deal? It is the process that the European Union has agreed upon to become the global leader on issues related to sustainable development and sustainable investment, including not only the decarbonization of the economy, but also things related to circular economy, to the blue economy and blue growth and so on. And just to give you a couple of numbers, because they are important, this is a mechanism that is planned to give up to 150 billion euro over the period 2021 to 2027 through the Just Transition Fund, the Invest in EU Just Transition Scheme, and investment and loans coming from the European Investment Bank. But it also looks into not only funding, but the Just Transition platform. So through it, it wants to provide the technical assistance to member states and investors so that this big leap to a change of paradigm for Europe will be happening. Some of the indicative things that Europe is driving through this is, of course, the Climate Pact and Climate Law, invest in more sustainable, smarter mobility, striving for greener industry, eliminating pollution, ensuring a just transition to this new paradigm for all, financing green projects, making homes energy efficient, global challenge, becoming the leader globally for global challenge. And of course, there are the very important parts of the from farm to fork, which is the renewed, let's say, common agricultural policy of Europe, protecting nature and biodiversity and clean energy that we mentioned before. And this is the background, but let's take a minute to think about the background of the country that we all come from and that we all love, our country, Greece. Now, Greece, just to get started, look at this. This is the place where three continents meet. So you have Africa, you have Asia, and you have Europe, and those three places get to meet exactly at the point where Greece is. And that means that Greece historically and throughout its geological formation and then formations also of civilization and everything has very special characteristics regarding its natural capital, and I'll come to that in a second. Its civilization. Only a few days ago, I happened to be in Crete and I saw the great exchange that was happening in Crete in the Neo-Minoan times, which is thousands of years ago, exchanges between the Phoenicians, Egypt, Western Mediterranean, Asia, and so on. So it's a place that has been really a mix and mingle place of civilizations. And of course, the geopolitical conditions that throughout time have shaped what Greece is. To come to this, let's say that it is important where you start from, because everybody wants to reach the sustainability paradigm, but not everybody starts from the same position. And I take the point that the starting point and the specificities of each one when they try to reach a level of sustainability is very important. Of course, you will excuse the cartoon, but I'm trying to make a picture talk about what I'm trying to say. So let's go back a bit in time, because I think that the historical perspectives mean a lot. This is the year, 2021, that we celebrate the 200 years of the Greek independence revolution. Greece was actually recognized as an independent state under the London Protocol in February 1830. So we're actually talking about less than 200 years that Greece has started building everything as a state. Before that, Greece did not exist as a state, except when Greece was a number of different separate states under the ancient regime, let's say, of ancient Greece. But all this has been pretty much razed, unfortunately, through the Ottoman occupation. And so in 1830, Greece is starting to build everything: a constitution, a legal system, the basic institutions, an education system, everything from scratch, less than 200 years ago. What happened next is that less than 100 years from that time, the Asia Minor catastrophe is taking place through the Greek-Turkish conflict. And unfortunately, this catastrophe meant that by late 1922, most of Greeks of Asia Minor had either fled or been killed, and Greece was flooded with immigrants, with people that had no place to stay, no homes, no houses, they had no jobs, no land to cultivate and everything. And it was a huge struggle for Greece that was just coming out of a non-existent status, the Greece at zero that I mentioned in my title, to start building a real country. And they had, at that time, Greeks had to face up this catastrophe that had raised not only the political and institutional, if you like, capacity of the country, but also the economic capacity of the country. What next happens is World War II. Greece comes out of World War II in 1944. And as this historical picture shows, poverty and homelessness and everything, and of course, a very, very big part of the male population of the country were nowhere to be found. They were totally raised. And that means that the country did not have the basic capital, human or material capital, to start rebuilding. And as if this was not enough, then Greece enters the Greek Civil War in 1946 to 1949, making things even worse and actually building time traps that have led Greek history through a number of problems throughout time. And this is an exercise I was doing in my preparation for today's discussion. I tried to apply some of the SDG principles on what Greece was looking like in the 50s. So let's take them one by one, not all of them, but I will take some characteristic ones. Greece, if it was dealt with under the SDG filter of no poverty, this is what you had in 1950s. Poverty was a very important issue. People were seriously poor. They didn't have any income. They didn't have land to cultivate on and so on. So it would not meet the criteria to be a no poverty country under the SDGs. Same thing with zero hunger. Children were expecting the syssitia, the food that was given to them from schools, the church, and foreign support to be able to survive because they didn't have any food. Health and well-being. This is a fantastic picture that I managed to dig out. This is a picture from a barber shop. And in those days, in the barber shops, if you had a bad tooth, you just go in the barber shop and they would take out the bad tooth. So that was the level of health support in the 50s. Quality education. I think the picture speaks for itself, whether Greece in these days had quality education or not. Gender equality. You've all seen the famous picture with the woman carrying the wood and the man on the donkey. Well, here we just have the woman. Clean water and sanitation. This is the idea that Greece had for clean water at the time. Young girls or women walking miles to just bring some fresh water at home. Decent work and economic growth. This picture is a tragic one. Is all the men that were living in the 50s, the country, to go as immigrants and work in Australia, in the States, in Germany, and whatever. Industry, innovation, infrastructure. This is a picture from the mountains around the area of Nafpaktos in Tolokarnania. That's the kind of infrastructure we're talking about. And of course, the sustainable cities and communities. It was a very interesting case where Greece had to move from this through, you might have heard the example of Hadjipateras, where you would give a piece of land and take an apartment, and it turned its cities into this. Now, one was bad, the other is not much better, in the sense that Greece is one of the places where cities have the least per capita and per square meter green spaces in its cities. And as if all this was not good enough, what then happens is that we had the 7-year dictatorship from 1967 to 1974, the infamous junta that happened in Greece. And of course, that was a very important blow, not only because it limited the democracy and the liberties of people and all that, but because it did this. It also did a very important blow. It dealt a very important blow on justice and strong institutions. Now, when you see a tank, a war tank, parked just outside the Greek parliament, that means that something is not working. And of course, legislation and the rule of law and everything went many years back through that process. Which means that if we come to this is a very important picture that I wanted to share with you, because what it shows, you do remember that we're talking about sustainability being a very important paradigm shift. This one shows that the paradigm shift is the top of this cone, of this pyramid. And in order to reach that point, you have to go through all of these very, very difficult steps. So you have to check the parameters, make sure that materials, toxin flows are controlled. You regulate negative feedback, you regulate positive feedback, information flows, system rules, self-regulation, systems goals, and then, and only then, you can talk about a paradigm shift. Now, with all what I've showed you before in Greece, if we take into account that we start talking about the democracy being established in Greece in 1974, and then the accession of the European Union, of Greece to the European Union in 1981, we're talking about a country that is actually starting to literally build its institutions and development path since 1980 or 1975, if you like. But this means that we're talking about a country that less than 100, about 70 years ago, has started doing everything. And it did come a very long way. Greece in this period, from 1974 or 81, if you like, has developed very major infrastructures. This is the famous bridge of Rio Andirio. This is Iliopoulos, so important infrastructure for transportation. It has become one of the very important players in the region for natural gas, not only from the Mediterranean, but also from the north, the Caspian Sea, and so on. And it is, as was mentioned again by Commissioner Michailidis, a very important player in renewable energy as well. Greece has become a place where you do find very innovative, very important health facilities, the Onasio Heart Center, which is one of the most important in the Balkans and the Mediterranean, and other facilities. And of course, it has developed a lot of its capacity also in terms of agricultural production, quality production, but also high-tech agricultural production. And I think that one of the most important parts that changed Greek economy for good was the development of mass tourism. Mass not in the sense of what comes to Greece, but how visitation is happening. Just to give you an indication of what we're talking about, Greece has a population of 10 million people. This year, the visitors that we will miss because of the COVID is about 6 million, which means that in a normal year, we get about 20 million visitors, sometimes 30 million visitors because of this mass tourism, 3 times the population of the country. And that means that a lot of capital is flowing in tourism, a lot of innovation is floating in tourism, a lot of things that shape the economy. Now, in this point that we find the Greek economy having made those huge strides to reach today's situation, the government has announced a few weeks ago, in May 2021, the Greece 2.0 National Recovery and Resilience Plan. This is part of the overall European Union process for the next generation EU. This is part of the green revolution that Europe is going through. And of course, what it wants to do is, and I put this out of the government's presentation, the Greek Recovery and Resilience Plan aspires to change the Greek growth model and institutions. So we're talking about a paradigm shift here. It is ambitious in terms of reforms and investments. It is ambitious towards an extroverted, competitive, green and digital growth model. And it's not just about investments. The government says that this is a fundamental economic and social transformation, which affects economic activity, technology, attitudes, institutions via reforms, and a transition that combines economic efficiency with social cohesion and justice. Fundamental economic and social transformation means this, that I mentioned before. What the government in Greece is trying to reach is this point up here, but we need to keep into our minds that we need to take all of these steps, and the period that the green transition and the transition towards a new paradigm for the whole European Union looks at the first step of only 7 years, 5 to 7 years of funding such things. So it is a pretty big mouthful, and it's not an easy process. However, there is quite a lot of funding for this. The budget that Greece has presented to the European Commission, and it was approved actually just a few days ago, the president of the European Commission was in Athens and has approved and has announced the approval of this plan, looks at in total 31.2 billion coming from the RRF, the Recovery Fund of the European Commission, and another about 60 billion mobilized investments from private investment. And this is why we will have to talk about ESG that was mentioned before. So all of this money is very important. And just to give you an indication while you're looking at these numbers, from our analysis, what we see as very, very important aspects of these mobilized investment resources that we see is that, of course, as I said before, tourism will be a very important case, not only by developing new facilities and new shell, if you like, or new buildings, but also innovation in the way that tourism operates, going into smaller scale, but higher quality tourism, higher end, and so on. Renewable energy becomes one of the most important parts of investment and development for the country. And also some of the new trends that we see in Greece really taking root and becoming important is innovation and entrepreneurship. Young people are doing more and more things based on innovation and new business things that they're developing. A very special type of tourism, which is the city tourism that combines small hotels, alternative recreation ideas, high quality food. And of course, one of the things that is very important for Greece, which is the quality food and products, and Greece is more and more focusing into that in higher quality and branded products. And one final point that I think is very important also for the Greek economy is the real estate, which is now booming again. It's taken a very high rise, and it is becoming again a major driver for many different points of view, from tourism, but also to the famous Golden Visa program, you know, for people that want to buy assets in Greece and get the European Union visa. Now, all of these things have been very important and they continue to become very important, but we think that one very important aspect of what the Greek government wants to see and what the country needs is also the importance of the major challenges that it needs to face. And to us, one of the first major challenges that need to be faced is institutions. I'm not happy to share this.
You can feed them.
Yeah, we can read them
They
easily.
bankrupted me. I got $2
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Mr. Kouvelis. Could everyone please mute their microphones, please, while
Did you hear anything I was saying over the last 10 minutes, or was I muted?
No, of course.
No,
We've
okay.
heard everything just over the last
Okay.
10 seconds, maybe.
All right. So I was saying that for Greece, it's very important to also address some of the major challenges that it needs to address in order to follow this path for sustainable development. And the first one is institutions. I'm not happy to be sharing this slide with you because it shows that in terms of the rule of law in the European Union, Greece, between 2019 and 2020, it has actually subsided by 0.9%. Actually, it went lower in this index of rule of law. And that is not a good thing, because just from everyone's experience, if you have to wait for like 16 months for the final ruling of a court of first instance, that means that driving business in Greece is very difficult because your access and your recourse to law is very limited. Second thing is transparency. Again, we see here a map that was put together by the World Bank and Transparency International indexes by actually the European Chamber of Commerce. And it shows that Greece is not even in the second or third highest ranking. Unfortunately, it's pretty low at the same level with Turkey and the countries of the former Balkans. So these are very important strides that need to be taken. And this is not about money. This is about political will and important decisions that will change totally the shape of how legislation works in Greece, how the courts work in Greece, how transparency for the government works in Greece and so on. The second very important thing is governance. We believe that governance is not a thing that only has to do with rule of law and transparent institutions, but also civic participation and efficient and accountable institutions. So what we try to do through our institute, the Institute for Sustainable Development, is to try to bridge the silos, bring together the sides of both the government, but also government and private sector and NGOs to work together. Second is to make sure that we do have a very strong system for monitoring and measuring. And here I'm again sorry to say that we have been nagging, if you like, the government over the last 6 months to work with them as much as we can for the implementation and monitoring of the SDGs. And unfortunately, the response has not been what we're expecting. And the third point is that we need to bring everyone in. So people and communities need to be involved in the development process so they will become the stronger supporters and the stronger drivers and doers in all this process. And then, of course, we have the challenges that emerge from current things. Climate change is very important. We do have a lot of contribution and discussion with the government for the new climate law that is being developed in Greece. And our opinion is that it needs to be a climate law that sets a platform on which all the changes that will emerge in Greece from climate change need to be addressed now, not waiting for them to happen, but preemptively, if you like, or in advance. Second thing, and I put this especially for you because I think it is very important, immigration and the geopolitical issues. You all know how important immigration is and the pressure that we get, especially from Turkey, opening the floodgates of thousands of people coming to Greece. And of course, all the efforts made by Greece and its government to make sure that we secure our geopolitical position. And I put this on purpose because I think that the US lobby and the Greek space in the US can play a very important role in this. So I wanted to share this with you. One more challenge is the importance of the natural capital of Greece. As I said before, Greece happens and it is at the convergence of three continents. And that means that it has a very, very rich flora and fauna and ecosystems and natural environment. Now, what is important is that this is at the same time a very important capital, but it comes with restrictions because you cannot do everything that you would want to do in a place where you do not affect biodiversity. This is a picture from the island of Kameni in Santorini. Can you see this? Like thousands of tourists, like ants walking in that place every day. That does have an impact, and things like this need to be controlled. We have a very big discussion in Greece, and we participate as a facilitator, as an honest broker, in a discussion between those that support renewable energy and those that oppose them, because we need that. We think that we need to find and put in place the right types of rules and agreements so that this can be developed without harming the most important parts of nature conservation in Greece. And this is also an example of what happens when aquaculture, for example, is not established with the proper rules and regulations. And so the way that you do the planning is very important. All of these things are very important, and they all come down to one bit, which was mentioned in your opening remarks, which is the ESG. We think that every type of investment that needs to happen in Greece needs to be able to get the green light from ESG impact investment assessment. And this is why our institute, in collaboration with a number of partners, has developed this methodology, which is called VeriMpact. It is one of the most advanced methodologies, I would say, in the world now, including applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we're currently applying it to a number of cases. We have very, very recently done a study of, I think, around 15 of the biggest Greek companies and collected information from their sustainability reports to see how they would really put up with a proper ESG assessment. And I'm not happy to say that for the time being, they don't do that well. So there is quite a lot of work that needs to be done on that. And having said that, I have to mention that we'll be very happy to work with HACC Innovators and the Hellenic-American Chamber to promote ESG and, of course, to lend the knowledge and capacity of our methodology on this. Now, before I close, just let me tell you a couple of things on our institute. This is the European Public Law Organization. We have facilities in 3 places, to this very beautiful place, which is just under the Acropolis in Athens. We have this training center, which is just outside Sunio in Attiki, where we can provide training. We can even provide hosting for people that come to study with us, because we have a facility that does the academic work as well. And we do a lot of work on policy making. These are two pictures of the most recent series of events that we have done about the climate law on one hand, and the implementation of the SDGs on the other. We do a lot of work on governance. As I said before, we're trying to bring together the sides that are for and against the development of renewable energy. And we do a lot of training. We just started our first PhD. We have our first PhD student on sustainable shipping and ESG investment. And we also did our first biolaw and biotechnology intensive course. That was a 2-week course that took place by internet. And of course, we participate and organize a lot of events because we believe that awareness is very important. I will not take any more time. Just before I say thank you and ask you all to get in touch with me if you want to ask any further questions, I would like us all to just consider for a moment that what we're talking about is a very, very narrow slice of time in which Greece is trying to catch up with the world. Just think that the United States establishment and the first constitution of the United States started around 100 years before Greece started to build its modern new country, its new nation. So we are one of the youngest countries actually in the world. We're trying to make huge strides for development. And this is why I think that to put the steps in the right order, to not again once more put the cart in front of the horses, as happened many times, will be very important. The tools are here. I think that collaboration with institutions like yours can make a lot of difference. And of course, from our part, we'll be very happy to share and collaborate and drive this process for Greece. And with these words, I want to thank you very much, and I'll be open for any questions and points that you might have, and of course, to follow my fellow speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kouvelis, for your remarks and insights. One exciting way to start the conversation, and I particularly like the historical context that you presented. So thanks again. And with that, I have the pleasure to introduce our moderator for the panel discussion, Ms. Iliopoulos. Ms. Papazoglou is currently the Director of the Climate Programs at the Business Council on Climate Change, and is also the co-founder of Ecogenia, which is a growing sustainability NGO in Greece. She'll be wearing both proverbial hats from her perspectives, working with both organizations to guide our conversation today. I'll now turn it over to Leah to introduce the panelists. Thank you, Leah.
Great. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm seeing head nods. Spyros, thank you for a perfect grounding for this conversation. I really couldn't have thought of any more appropriate context and grounding for this conversation. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. I'm sure the panelists will have a lot to reference based on your talk. So excited to dig in here. Thank you all for joining once again. Very quickly, I am actually based in California. And as John mentioned, I work at the Business Council on Climate Change, which is a public-private partnership based here in the Bay Area. So we work with a lot of the usual suspects in San Francisco Bay Area. I'm sure you can guess: Google, Autodesk, Genentech, some of the biggest companies that also, of course, have a global presence. And we work to break down those silos to have them work effectively with the local policymakers here in the Bay Area, as well as the state of California. As I'm sure, as you all know, California is leading in terms of the states when it comes to climate work and climate policy. And with that being said, John also mentioned I'm wearing a second hat today with Ecogenia. We are hoping to train and mobilize the next generation of sustainability leaders across Greece, hoping to keep that young, inspired power in the country and mobilizing them on behalf of sustainability and the climate. So I'll be wearing both of those hats. I'm excited to kind of bring some best practices from here in the States and from California into the conversation. But I'm very eager to introduce you all to our panelists who represent 3 different countries, all Greek, of course, working in different sectors and different areas of sustainability. So we have so much to learn from them and all of their different perspectives. So with that, I'm just going to dig in and introduce you. We have Giorgos Iliopoulos with us today from Greece in Athens. He is the founder and managing director of Aiphoria and president of the Union of Environmental Scientists. So also wearing 2 very interesting hats. We have Gabriel Karageorgiou, the partner and Arabesque, at Arabesque Asset Management. And we have Marina Hadjipateras, co-founder and general partner at TMV. So instead of me explaining to you what their background is and all the amazing work that they bring to the table, I wanted them to have a moment to speak about their background and give you some context about who they are and what they're bringing to the table for the conversation today. So with that, we're going to start with Giorgos. And if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about your background and the current work that you're doing, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Leah, and thank you for inviting me today. Sorry, my voice is not at its best today. And congratulations, of course, for organizing this event about the business case of sustainability. Of course, I'm biased because I'm working in this area, but nevertheless, I think it's really interesting and an upcoming issue. My relationship with sustainability started gradually, actually. It was never that I never said, that I will work in this field, but it was small steps. Now I'm working as a sustainability and ESG consultant at Aiphoria Consulting, which I founded some years ago. And we help private and also public organizations develop their sustainability strategies and their framework on how to approach sustainable development issues. And we are also one of the most experienced companies in Southeastern Europe in sustainability reporting, since I was working for the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, which is the organization that has developed the standards for sustainability reporting that are used by companies globally. So this is pretty much what I do. And at the Union of Environmental Scientists of Greece, which is a scientific organization for the promotion of the environmental and sustainable development agenda in Greece, we make various things towards this direction. And we also, from time to time, contribute to the public dialogue about sustainable development, and or we participate in the public dialogue about new laws that are under discussion in the parliament. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. We're so lucky to have someone representing from the Greek perspective on the panel. So thank you for joining. Gabriel.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the kind invite, and thank you for everyone attending this call on a Saturday afternoon, especially out of very hot Greece. So thank you for that. So my name is Gabriel Karageorgiou. I am not going to say that I grew up thinking about sustainability and how to have a positive impact to the world. My background is in physics and this kind of stuff. I started my career in banking with Lehman Brothers, and I spent a few more years afterwards in the banking industry. I co-founded a consulting firm together with a couple of very good friends, KKS, specializing in sustainable consulting asset owners and asset managers on how to integrate ESG considerations in their capital allocation processes. And over the past years, I have been a partner at Arabesque Asset Management. And Arabesque is a group of companies effectively that is at the cutting edge of what we believe is going to disrupt finance in general. The first one is ESG and sustainability, and the second one is technology and AI. And through our various services, we are helping investors and corporates to do so. And that's me.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'm excited to hear more of your perspective from the banking industry. It was very, very interesting to learn in grad school how much of an impact the banking industry can have in this whole space. So thank you for joining. And Marina, please.
Certainly, and thank you all the members of HACC and John and Spyros and Leah for having me here too. So I run an early stage venture capital fund called TMV, and we invest in mission-driven founders with a focus on the future of work, sustainability, supply chain and logistics, financial technology, and healthcare. And we've raised about a little over 60 million to date to invest in right now 40 portfolio companies who are all changing the world for the better in one way or another. My background is in maritime shipping, and I am the vice chair of the Intertanko Environmental Committee, which I joined a little over 10 years ago. I joined that because I thought that the shipping industry had a wrongly sort of a reputation outside of anyone within shipping of only oil spills and things that everybody could see on the news. And I wanted to work with the environmental committee to, one, be able to describe all of the benefits, which are tremendous, of the shipping industry, and also see what we were doing to working with the IMO and on different regulations to make the industry more environmentally sustainable. And so I've been working closely and still work closely with the IMO there, and have been working with some amazing founders who are building companies that are either focusing on sustainability directly by privatized recycling or excess food waste, or through their companies, whether it's maybe it's Future of Work. We have a shipping company that aggregates data on the bridge of a ship to help with optimization and efficiency. But by doing that, it also reduces emissions by up to 30%. So I think sustainability is actually a common theme throughout all of our thesis points, even though, even if it's not meant to be, but there's a lot of work to still be done.
Thank you for that. And yes, the shipping industry is more relevant than ever. It even, I think Spyros touched on it a bit in his presentation. So very important space to be in. And it must be quite energizing to work with companies and entrepreneurs kind of digging into all these different spaces. So Marina, I'm actually going to come back to you, and you started to touch on this a bit, but if you can tell us a bit more about your why, your purpose for kind of being in this sustainability work, that would be great. We'd love to hear a bit more.
Sure. I mean, I think that it used to be a niche, and that's finally become mainstream to focus on sustainability. You almost get marked down if you're a company that doesn't have some type of a practice in place. I think the challenge is, what does that mean? How does sustainability apply to your business? And so making a framework and a structure that's relevant to your business is something that I think companies are still working on. But for me, it made sense. It's good business. We've seen more than ever over the past year that you can't ignore focusing on the environment. And so my why, I guess it came from inside, and it was just more, regulations are coming into play, but also like Spyros was saying, and like we've said, the next gens are focusing so much on a purpose and profit when they're investing their money. And so I've just been looking for founders and focusing our shipping company too. I mean, we changed from trouble-free transportation to, we put clean in our thesis kind of around that. So that's a little bit about my why.
That's great. And actually, just to touch on your point, it's come up quite a few times about the Gen Z, influence, and how employees and people that are in the workforce and consumers and how they have different expectations, right? And how critical that is. And I actually was brought on at the Business Council on Climate Change to work on employee engagement programming, because all of our members were kind of trying to think about how to bring their employees and connect them to their sustainability work, because it's so critical, right? They're in their organization, and giving them that purpose is important to keeping them. So yeah, I've been hearing that as a common theme. I just wanted to touch on it. But Gabriel, would love to hear more about your why and telling us, just personally, what's motivating you to work in sustainability.
I think I'm going to build on what Marina just said. For me, it was the moment that I was explained by a very good friend, the name of whom probably you know, because first of all, he's a fellow Greek who is carrying our flag globally, and secondly, because he's probably the most well-known academic in the field of ESG investing, George Serafin. And it was almost 10 plus years ago that George explained to me ESG in a way very different from what I was hearing before. So unfortunately, and still to date, too often sustainability and ESG is perceived as green and ethical and all this kind of stuff. He explained it to me in a way that he never used these terms, and it just made good business sense, as Marina said. So the moment that we start treating ESG as a new set of probably unstructured as of now data that allow us to understand how a company is managed, what the strategy of a company is, and effectively all of those things that drive the financial performance of companies, then you just say, okay, ESG, it's just enabling me to take better informed financial decisions. And who would not like to do that? It's not only that you understand the management quality of the company, you also understand the strategy of the company. It's redefining sustainability, and effectively that's why I'm doing it, because I don't treat it as a different thing. I treat it as a way that allows me to understand what I am doing better.
Thank you for that perspective. That's great. Giorgos, last but not least, would you mind sharing a bit more about your why and why you're personally motivated to work in this space?
Sure. Well, my background is in environmental science, so there is an organic relationship between environmental science and sustainable development. But when you are an environmental scientist, you have to decide whether you will focus on environmental things purely or if you will mix with other things. And as you mentioned, Leah, and you, Gabriel, earlier, I realized that the change will come not from just protecting the environment, but the role of the banking system and how it works, and the role of the market is very important in order to reach a more sustainable development. So it was a point that I decided to follow this path, and that led me to what I do today.
Thank you. I know one thing I personally find very exciting about sustainable development as an area of expertise is that it's so holistic. And I think Spyros did a great job of highlighting that in his presentation, how the SDGs cover so much, and it's a very holistic process, right? So I find that personally very exciting and motivating as well, is that you can be thinking about social impact, reducing poverty and gender equality, while also thinking about the environment and the economy, to your point, Giorgos. So digging into the real topic of today, right, the business case for sustainability, I would love to touch on how you, as professionals in the various ecosystems that you work, make this case, this business case for sustainability. So really digging into the topic. And if you can pull on some compelling examples of how you've seen this apply in your various sectors, or perhaps with your clients, Giorgos, as an example, it would be great to hear a bit more about that. And I actually would love to start with Gabriel for this question.
Yeah, sure. And if you allow me, in order to answer this, I would like to start with a definition for sustainability, if you don't mind. And full disclosure, it's per my dictionary. So when I am thinking about a sustainable company, I am defining a sustainable company as one that it is positioned for long-term financial success while accounting for all stakeholders' interests. And as I said before, ESG data are just the means to quantify its corporate strategy and its management quality that will enable it to deliver towards its objectives. So, for example, just because a company is involved in the oil sector, it does not mean by construction that it is not a sustainable company. And vice versa, because a company is involved in renewable energy, it does not mean that it is sustainable. An oil company actually that understands that oil is a stranded asset, that understands that regulatory and other pressures will increase. So, the core asset that defines its business model at the moment is not going to be there, or it will be very difficult to explore in a few years' time, then this kind of company will try to identify ways that will allow it to innovate in order to be part of a greener economy. And that oil company is probably 100% more sustainable than a renewables company that it is taking badly decisions, management decisions that are very, very short-sighted. So again, it depends on definitions, and that would be my definition of a sustainable company. So on your question now on how we are building the business case, we are just trying to explain exactly that ESG is not a tick box exercise. It's not something that environmentalists do. And the moment that we manage to do that, this is then when we have the attention of the senior management. And now clients can actually understand that this is just good corporate practice that will allow them to improve their information environment. In more practical terms, if you wish, as Arabesque, we have effectively as Arabesque, we are a group of 3 different companies. At the very core, we have asset management. So this is where we are providing investors with investment products. We have an arm that we are calling the S-Ray. And this arm is effectively our sustainability research hub, where we are summarizing data from companies and we are assessing their sustainability performance. And then we have an artificial intelligence research arm that effectively does quite a lot of the investment product construction for us. So, and we work, and that means that we work with asset owners, with asset managers, and with corporations. So in practical terms, with asset owners, we provide them with these investment solutions and tools that will help them align their investment, their liabilities with their investment horizon. And we build this kind of products for them. With asset managers, we provide them with information and data that allows them to enhance their own strategies through our ESG scoring. And with corporates, we help them understand their current status quo and what the low-hanging fruits for them are that will allow them to improve their materiality-driven sustainability performance, and also help them disclose their work with third parties.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate you grounding us in a definition, because for those of you who maybe are newer to the sustainable development world, it's quite interesting. There are several definitions of sustainable development out there. The UN has one, and it's actually quite important to start with a definition. So I appreciate, Gabriel, you starting with your guiding post. It's very helpful. So with that, I would love to go to Giorgos and hear his opinion on this question, how exactly you do present the business case for sustainability and how it's applying in your work.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that the business case for sustainability is quite a mix of many different parameters right now for a company. In the United States or in Europe, it's quite the same context, I think. It's very, very, very close. From the one side, I think we have the regulation that is pushing from more and more sustainable practices, right? We have regulations for many aspects, from environmental aspects, social aspects, governance practices that should be implemented. And especially in Europe, we have a directive that is asking for big companies to issue an ESG sustainability report, which we also call it non-financial report, and to disclose information about how they do in terms of sustainability and disclose their performance. So from the one side, we have the regulation, but I think there is also a huge trend in the market. You can't really operate nowadays, as Mr. Michailidis also mentioned earlier, if you don't manage well those issues. So it is a necessity that comes from the market trends. If you see your main competitors being advanced on those practices, you have to follow, right? And we know that some of the biggest companies right now in the world, in the States and also in Greece, are also leading this discussion towards ESG performance. And of course, we have consumers that become more and more aware, and they ask from companies to do well by doing good, not just doing well. So I think it's a mix of drivers, and it is more and more clear that there is a strong business case for companies to advance their sustainability performance.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very interesting because, as you and as you also mentioned, Giorgos, Michailidis mentioned in the beginning, it's almost if you're not thinking about sustainability now as a business, you're going to be diving into the deep end as these regulations continue to come forward, right? You need to be thinking about it, getting ahead of it. Otherwise, financially, it's not going to make sense for your business quite soon. So thank you for bringing that up, both of you, both Giorgos, both of them. Marina.
So, I mean, yeah, just to piggyback, I agree with everything, that Gabe and Giorgos said. And for our business, we have investors who invest in our fund because they are looking to make an impact, and they are looking for companies within our portfolio that focus on sustainability in one way or another. And so every day when we're raising the fund, we're speaking to different investors about what are companies, what they do, and how they're making an impact. And so there's that angle of it. And then there's also the companies that we're working with who are either specifically focused on sustainability, like I mentioned before, or who can focus on it in one way or another. And we go in so early to these companies, we call it the first 2 years of vulnerability, where it may be just 2 founders and they haven't built out a team yet, or they're 6 people, and they grow pretty fast. So they're, by the end of those 2 years, where they may be raising a new round of finance that we would bow out of, they may be 50 people at that point. But we can work with them because we're at that early stage on how to grow a sustainable business. So not only with what their business is, but with the company that they're about to create, and how to focus on it in that way. And then also how to, I think Gabe said low-hanging fruit. There's some low-hanging fruit that I think that you don't know that you can think about. And so if you have more people around the table, because the one thing is, what is impact? What is sustainability? What is ESG? They're different, there's still a little bit of, not confusion, but I think that if you help someone define or show them how you can focus more on sustainability, and it is just good business, and I do think that you will get marked down if there isn't an aspect that you focus on, then that makes it less niche-y and just more like, okay, this makes sense. We're going to do this, and you can record it, and then you hold yourself accountable for it, and then others see that, and then things move forward. So that's how we specifically focus on sustainability.
That's great. And the influence that you can have at those beginning stages when a company is really figuring out how they want to be governed, how they want to be structured, how they can be sustainable at the beginning. I mean, that's incredible that you can work with folks at those beginning stages. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you all. So moving on to the next question, I want to talk more about the impact that the private sector can have on a nation's progress for sustainable development, on a locality's progress. Here, me representing the Business Council on Climate Change, I can speak to the fact that we were actually founded when Gavin Newsom was mayor of San Francisco. Now he's the governor, for those of you who maybe don't know California politics. And he was trying to create some really ambitious climate goals for the city. And he very, very astutely noticed and was aware of, if he didn't bring businesses into that conversation at the early stage, it would be much more challenging for them to actually meet those local goals. So the Business Council on Climate Change was really designed and founded on this idea that businesses really do have a significant impact when it comes to climate goals and climate progress. Another example for you, for the past 4 years, the United States, was tinkering on the brink of pulling out of the Paris Accord, and businesses across the US signed pledges, cities signed pledges to stay in, right? They said, we are going to do everything that we can to continue to use this as our bar of success. So businesses really can have a tremendous impact, and there's a track record for that. Another example is recently the SDG Index released a report kind of showing how different European nations were making progress towards sustainable development and the SDGs, and Greece was ranked, near the bottom of that list. So I really, in this question and in all of your answers, I would love for you to speak to, in your opinion, from the sectors that you work in and from what you've seen in your work, what role and what impact can the private sector have, right? So some case studies or some examples that you have. And also, you know, speaking, since we're all invested in Greece, whether it's in our hearts or physically there, you know, how can the private sector perhaps really help Greece make progress in this way? And since I have this Greek lens, particularly on this question, I'd love to start with Giorgos because he's the one working and operating in Greece.
Thank you, Leah. Well, first of all, I wanted to comment that indeed Greece in the past did not do so well in the Sustainable Development Goals, but as Mr. Kouvelis mentioned earlier during his presentation, this is changing dramatically. And I think that the last government has made so many steps that maybe a lot of there is a great focus on sustainable development right now in Greece and green investments. And I think that this will lead to a big change in the next assessments during next years. It is very interesting to see that the majority of the stimulus package will be directed to green investments and to support the advancements of sustainable development goals. And let's not forget that being one of the being near the bottom in EU doesn't necessarily mean, you know, doing bad in global context, since EU is the leader along with the United States, of course, globally for the Sustainable Development Goals in relation to Asia or Africa or other regions. So having said that, I think that the role of the private sector is really, really important. Government, of course, should not do everything and will not do everything for advancing sustainable development goals and sustainability. And I think it is really important to see the bigger companies to contribute to the advancement of a more sustainable development in Greece. And I think that right now it is a great momentum in Greece because we are going to have a really high growth of GDP during next years. We expect a 4-point-something up to 5% growth of GDP, which Greece hasn't seen for many, many years since financial crisis during last 10 years at least. So it is a good momentum in terms of growth of economy, but it's also a good momentum in terms of sustainability things happening and investing with a green direction towards a green direction will be really helpful for Greece.
Yeah, thank you, Giorgos, and thank you for the additional context, because you're right, you know, this particular report that I mentioned, and I'll drop it in the chat if anybody is curious to take a look at it, but it's relevant for the European Union, and thinking about the global context is important. And, you know, certainly there's a lot of exciting investments and progress to be made, just as Spyros was mentioning in his presentation in the beginning. So I only see opportunity, right, for Greece to continue to make more and more progress and kind of grow in the rankings. So thank you. Marina, would love to go to you next for this question.
Sure. So, you know, I agree with Giorgos. I think that it's really important for the private sector to focus on this. And I think sometimes government moves the private sector, or sometimes the private sector will move government. And right now it seems like things are, over the past few years, going hand in hand where the different regulations are taking place in private sector. There's a desire now versus and a necessity, but there's also a desire, and I think it's because consumers are speaking with their dollars, and they're you know, buying things and investing in things that are good for the environment, and it's important now. And so so for me, I think that holding yourself accountability is something that's really important as a corporation, and I think companies are doing that now. And it may have started out with consumers holding companies accountable because they were losing, you know, money or they were losing customers. But I'm happy with the way where things are going, and So I think, yeah, that's how I feel with regards to the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point about how the relationship between the public and the private sector is, right? That the private sector really can collectively have a big impact on what is happening in government and affect policy. And we've certainly seen that again at the Business Council on Climate Change. The collective of our membership of all of these companies working together and coming to the city and maybe asking for certain policies to get put in place, you know, it has a massive impact, right? So that's a really good point. Thank you for that. Gabriel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer here is it is pivotal, yes. In my mind, I think the private sector is engaged with something either because it has to or because it wants to. And usually you are going to have solutions when you're doing something because you want to and because you see opportunities there and not because someone told you to do so. So regulation will not be the driver of it. So what I'm trying to say is that for the private sector, as long as the incentives and the business case are there to address SDGs, then the private sector will come. And then, because it is an agile sector, it can drive innovation, then we are actually going to have real solutions. But it is important to focus on the incentives and the business case, because contributing towards the SDGs should not be just a philanthropic activity. The financial return is there. So as Marina was mentioning earlier, I am pretty sure that your investors are trusting you, not because only they want to have an impact, but because first of all, they want to have an equal, if not better financial return that they would have with a more conventional investment, while at the same time also having an impact with the definition of impact as we tend to define it now. And that's something that it is our job to communicate, that the one is not coming at the expense of the other. If anything, the two go hand in hand, and I can also build a case that you do not only see the correlation, but also the causation in some of the cases, especially over the next years, where I personally believe that the transition to a greener economy probably represents us with the biggest commercial opportunity. Yeah, I think that's my point. It is pivotal what the private sector can contribute towards addressing the SDGs.
Thank you. And you bring up something that we've noticed as a trend here in the States, especially across our membership at the Business Council on Climate Change. Traditionally, in the States, this is historically lived kind of in the CSR world. But of course, as we know, and Gabriel, as you just pointed out, it can't. It needs to go beyond that. You have to invest resources and have a team of people thinking about sustainability, impact reporting, ESG. So it's been an interesting evolution, because for quite a while in the States, a lot of this work started as a CSR kind of philanthropic effort, unfortunately. And it's been evolving, thank goodness, by investments of the private sector, right? Really spending the time to think about their supply chains, about climate-based targets, right? So not just about, you know, some CSR initiatives, which I think is really, really important to pull out, and kind of a nice segue into my next question, which is, you know, what you think some of the biggest challenges are for Greece and or just businesses, generally speaking, in sustainable development, and any trends you see. So I highlight that one also as we dive into this question, because obviously an investment of resources is challenging sometimes for businesses to find out how to actually get started and how they can invest the right amount of time and capacity and staff time to this type of work. So that's one trend I can speak to as a challenge. But yeah, for all of you, I would love to start with Marina. If you could just speak a bit to what you see as the challenges for Greece or for businesses operating in Greece, however you want to kind of choose to answer the question, to adapt sustainable development principles into their work.
Sure. I think one of the challenges was and is now changing the mindset of in Greece, where it was, if it's not broken, don't fix it, instead of this can be 10 times better or 100 times better. And And I think that mindset is very quickly changing, and there's a lot more openness to change and to how to improve. And that's because of the way the world is moving, and because, again, of the desire from a customer base, as much as new technology that is just out there that has proven to be successful and better for, again, optimization or efficiency, and also sustainability in one way or another. So I think it's the mindset, and then I think it's the discussion on what does it mean to make your company sustainable? What does that mean? And so, people like Gabe, I think that you really laid it out well, and I can see how helpful it would be to a company who might want to focus on this, but doesn't know where to start. So that's just a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So I think those are two things that I've noticed, especially the mindset, which I'm very happy is changing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that example. And it's something, we're putting my other hat on here for a moment with Ecogenia, that we've noticed as a big opportunity, right? We've done some focus groups with young people in Greece between 18 and 25, and they've really identified that they are very, very eager to be a part of the solution for the climate crisis and the various crises, honestly, facing Greece. And they want to plug in and be a part of that solution, but they're not quite sure how to plug in, right? And it's challenging to see the opportunities. And we're trying to create this culture and this mind shift change of kind of doers and feeling like they can be activated for change in that way. But it's certainly a challenge. So thank you for bringing that one up. Gabriel.
I don't think I will say something very different from what Marina was saying. I think, again, I wouldn't necessarily see it as a challenge. I would see it primarily as an opportunity to grow. And I would always start with education. And I think this is something, at least from the little that I have seen and the little time that I am spending in Greece, we can do a lot more work. And there are great initiatives. For example, the Athens Stock Exchange had done a fantastic ESG reporting guide. What Spyros was mentioning earlier with the Institute for Sustainable Development, and how we are working with market actors to educate them about what ESG and sustainability is. So my first point is educate. We need to communicate that sustainability is not a theme. I would probably say that sustainability is just a description of a business model, if anything. And we need to understand that this financial return, it is not financial or sustainability return. Actually, you can have both. So that would be number one. And I will build a little bit on what Marina was saying earlier around the mindset. And I would rephrase it also as attitude and culture. And what I would like to say here is that for both public and private companies, we should move away from a short-term way of thinking to a more long-term way of thinking. So when it comes to public companies, the companies should not be focusing on their quarter-to-quarter financial returns. It's just that you're setting the goalpost at the very, very wrong place. You need to communicate a strategy that will take you over the next 5 to 10 years. And this is why reporting is so important. And again, where the work that Spyros and the team are doing can be pivotal here. And when it comes to private companies, who do not have shareholders and they need to align them, with their investment horizon. I appreciate that there are short-term pressures, financial pressures, too often, but working towards addressing short-term pressures, it may take you through the month or the quarter. It will not take you through the years, and nobody's starting a business to see it, dying within 1 or 2 years. So. What I would say here is, also Amazon's mantra, have the courage to be misunderstood for long-term periods. And identify what is going to be disrupting the industries that you are operating within, and have this kind of culture. Yeah.
Wow, I really like you said, I have the courage to be misunderstood. And that was a beautiful quote, can you repeat that?
It's not me, it's Amazon.
I know.
Yeah, so yeah, I am one of the weird guys who is reading annual reports of companies, even if we are a quantitative asset manager. But Jeff Bezos, in his letters pretty much every year, he attributes the success of Amazon to the courage that they are showing to be misunderstood for long periods of times. And they are investing into projects that others would not touch. And yeah, it's where people do not want to go, and someone decides to go, and everybody afterwards says, okay, that was easy. Not really.
No, thank you for that. And I appreciate you framing challenges as opportunities. I think it's very important for us to be thinking about that, especially people in sustainability and climate work, because everything can feel like a challenge. So thinking of it also as an opportunity is important. Okay, Giorgos.
Yeah, well, I would like to agree with what Marina mentioned earlier about the mindset. I believe that one of the biggest challenges for Greece, not for sustainability, but in general, is the culture and the mindset about some things. We all have Greek roots here, and we all understand that. And I think it's not by lack that the government decided to focus on this paradigm shift, as Spyros mentioned earlier in his presentation. I think that change in the culture of the leaders, but also of the wider society as well, will contribute to a better future for Greece. And this is also an opportunity, right? Because supporting young people and influencing them with the values of a more sustainable development, of a development that can be sustained during next decades and in general in the future, will really be helpful for the tomorrow of Greece. You also asked Leah about some trends. I think that education for sustainable development is really a trend in Greece. I hear more and more about training programs about sustainable development in general. And also climate action is really a trend. The increase of investments in renewable energy sources in Greece. Greece is becoming a leader in European Union towards this direction. To mention here that some months ago, Greece reached an all-time record of percentage of renewable energy sources in the grid. And it was a European record, not just national. So it is a clear trend right now in Greece. It is a central decision to go decarbonized during next decades. And this is really a business opportunity for companies operating in this sector. Digitalization is also a clear trend. Finally, in Greece, the time has come to focus on developing digital tools. Gov.gr is really a great tool, and in general, digitalization, digital transformation is happening right now. Sustainable tourism also is going through a transformation to a more sustainable model, not just massive, but a more sustainable model. And yeah, I think that's some of the latest trends towards sustainable development.
Thank you for speaking, to all those trends that you're seeing and feeling directly in Greece. It's really helpful. And I'm personally very excited to hear all of you sort of flag the culture and mindset as a challenge, but also an opportunity, because again, wearing my Ecogenia hat, it's very much a big part of our theory of change to be sort of infiltrating the workforce through young people, right? Mobilizing young people on behalf of the Sustainable Development Goals and on behalf of, kind of being climate ambassadors and activating them civically, for the rest of their life. as they stay in Greece, whether through their jobs or through their personal lives, making sure that they're always wearing their climate hat. So I am very grateful that our theory of change is resonating with all of you in terms of the culture and mindset change, and hopefully we can help make an impact there. And Giorgos, I'm going to come back to you for one of our final questions. We're going to be wrapping up here in a moment, and hopefully we'll be able to get one or two questions. But speaking of opportunity, if you could kind of keep it simple, because you all did a great job of flagging a challenge as an opportunity, but what, in your opinion, is kind of the biggest opportunity for businesses in getting started with sustainable development, and any anecdotal examples of how they can get started if they haven't yet?
Right. Well, I think also Gabriel touched it before during his answer. I think you can't really be successful right now if you don't include ESG criteria on the way you work, on your business model, and if you does not transform your business model towards a more sustainable direction. A starting point can be a materiality analysis, which is an analysis according with international standards of your company's most material sustainable development issues. What are your impacts towards the society, and how you are being impacted from recent trends, on the other hand. This is the concept of double materiality, as we say, how the company influences and how the company is being influenced. So this is a starting point. ESG reporting is also a very necessary step for companies in order to be successful, and developing a sustainability strategy is an ultimate goal in order to be able to present a more advanced performance towards this direction.
Thank you. Yeah, so materiality assessment, understanding your baseline, and then creating a strategy to move forward.
Exactly.
Okay, Marina. Yes, Marina.
I would say, and Spyros spoke to this in his presentation, but going through either the sustainable development goals one by one, and with a company or within your company, or the IRIS Plus standards, which is another form of the SDG goals, and seeing how a company applies to each one, and if they do. And I say this because we had one institutional investor that came in and had us level up even higher and said, "Go look, can you please look through your whole entire portfolio of 35 companies at the time and speak to each one of the SDG components 1 through 10 and say how each of the companies is focusing on one of these things, or all of these things, or if they're not." And so we had to do sort of a whole entire point there, and it really did level us up even more so. I mean, we say we invest in sustainability, and we focus on mission-driven founders, but this put it on paper and helped us move forward in a even more informative way, and I think meaningful way too. So doing that and really just putting pen to paper and looking at how you're being affected, or you're affecting in one way or another with regards to sustainability, is a good practice and a good idea.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like a very thorough process to go through as well.
A lot of diligence.
Okay, Gabriel.
Yeah, could I jump in for a second?
Please.
For just one thing that I would like to comment on. I want to thank all of the panelists for their very, very interesting points of view. There's just one point that I wanted to make. I will not refer now to some questions that were put. Maybe in the end I can say one or two things about the specific questions. But one thing that I heard, and I was very interested by what Marina just said, is that from our analysis and approach, there is one very important point to take into account when you're talking about ESG and the SDGs implementation. And this is that this is a system that does not really allow itself to piecemeal approach. Either you do it or you don't. So if you say that you are doing very well at 60% of the SDGs or the sub-targets and all that, this doesn't mean that you're sustainable. It means that you're sustainable in some aspects, but overall, one of the most classic examples that we give is that you might have a company that is doing great in limiting CO2 emissions and gender equity and all that, but it happens to use child labor. Is that a sustainable company? It's not. So the piecemeal approach is something that needs to be taken care of very importantly when you do this, because this is where it's the detail where the devil hides. The second thing I wanted to say is that I heard and I found very interesting the point that Gabriel made, and thank you for the many references to the work that we do in our institute, Gabriel. You mentioned incentives. Now, I think that I've never been a Thatcherite myself, but I think that the private sector needs to look into the way it can use trends and opportunities and turn them into incentives. So the first one, as Paul Paulson from Unilever used to say, is that unless you engage the ESG and sustainability thing, you will not live in the long term. Now, to me, this is a very important incentive. You have to get into that on that bus. Otherwise, you will not be alive in 5-10 years or what have you. And I think that the most important decision-making tool that gives intelligent solutions. Just to give you one example, in analysis that we have done, we found that for companies that want to reduce their CO2 emissions and so on, sometimes it pays much more to do a very good training of their staff and their crew rather than investing in new machinery. Because the emissions and wastage of energy that you get from misusing the existing machinery is much higher in impact than it is. And finally, I want to come again to the point of the importance of institutional establishment, and so you create a level playing field, because some will measure properly the ESG, some others will just do what we call a greenwashing, and that is a very important problem. And this is where I think that the regulators need to step in. We will be having a discussion like this. Christina shared with you all the link to the event that we're organizing on the 1st and 2nd of July in Delphi with the Delphi Forum, where we will have a very interesting discussion with about 30% of the Ministerial Council of Greece about the recovery funds and how this blends into the ESG and what is needed to make sure that these two things come together. So do check this link that Christina said, and thank you for sharing it with us. And I'll be here for another few minutes, 5 minutes or so, if we can go into the questions that were put by the public. Thank you.
Yes, Spiro, thank you for chiming in. I'm actually, I would love if you could touch on one word you said that hasn't been brought up yet, but it's greenwashing. And I'm not sure, in case people aren't familiar with that term, would you mind just elaborating on what that term means and what you meant by referencing it?
Yeah, greenwashing is a thing that has been around for a long time, and it's like how you can present yourself on doing all the right things while you're not actually. And this can be very important in the case of ESG, because depending on the methodology and indicators and disclosures that you do, you can appear to be doing very well. And in fact, you're doing much, much worse. I had recently, I will not name that person, but recently an elected person in Greece who told me that, look, we can do very good transportation road actually development projects that are not necessarily considered the most sustainable thing. And all we have to do is just to change, instead of using too much asphalt, to use some more cement, and then the project becomes much more sustainable. I said, no, that's totally greenwashing. So you have to be very careful on what you measure, how you present it, and how you do it. And this is why a level playing field is important. And I think that important entities that are doing work like Arabesque, for example, who are doing very important work in developing work in terms of indicators and so on, make a lot of difference, because we need to be having a common language for that.
Mm-hmm.
Bravo, thank you for that. And John, we're going to wrap up, I promise. I just want to give Gabriel a chance to answer the last question.
I'm sorry, Leah, I'm so sorry, only because Spyros is about to leave, he said. So actually one question that was on point on his remarks, I figured I would raise it now, and then we can proceed with the other questions you have. But Dimitris Zervos asked that Greece does have some sort of sustainability plan, but I think he was curious about the necessary financing to support it. Now, I know last week the EU endorsed a recovery plan. I know that you alluded to it in your presentation, Spyros, worth 36-some billion US dollars, and Greece does have a national program, among which they're trying to phase out the lignite-fired power plants, I think by the year 2028. Can you speak a little bit about the source of funding to try to promote the green initiatives in Greece, including the energy industry?
So very quickly, as I said in my presentation, and it is in one of the first slides that I understand you will be sharing this presentation and this video with everyone. the Green Transition Fund and the Green Deal Fund that comes to Greece only is something that will channel about 90 billion euro for the period 2021 to 2027. That's quite a lot of money in terms of public and private funding. It includes quite a lot of funding in terms of loans as well from the European Investment Bank. But this is not the only source because, for example, that includes part of what we call the Green Transition Fund, which will be targeted specifically to the lignite touched areas like Megalopoli and Ptolemaida, where around 15 to 20, if I remember the numbers just by heart now, billion will be channeled to change the whole model of development of those regions, focusing into renewable energy, hydrogen, changing to e-mobility and so on. The important part, though, for all of this is how one can mobilize also private investment. And one very important aspect is that our institute is in close communication with the Hellenic Development and Investment Bank, HDBI, who has already set out a number of calls for sustainable investment. And from our understanding, they will be doing something very focused on sustainable investment and impact investment, and we will be supporting them with our methodology and work. And of course, the work that is done by the stock exchange that Gabriel mentioned is very important. You know, it's also a matter of not only having the funds in place, but having the literacy, the sustainable investment literacy that needs to follow through so that people can actually grab these opportunities and do it. And I think we all need to contribute into that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And there's been a few questions about tourism, and I just want to kind of give a plug. One thing that we are discussing with John in a future version, perhaps of the EcoHella series, is to have a topic on tourism. So stay tuned for that. I know that there's been some questions in the chat, and just want to give Gabriel a chance to answer the last question before we kind of move to actually addressing some of the Q&As in the chat box. So Gabriel, please.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the question is how a company can get started on sustainability, and I will keep it short. And since you liked my Amazon quote earlier, if you allow me, I will again reference one of those quotes that Amazon is using, which is do not manage for outputs, manage for inputs. A company, it's not its revenue and its profit. These are output measures. A company is its purpose, it's the impact that its products are having, it's the footprint that the company has within the communities it is operating within, it is its culture and its employees, etc., etc. All these are input metrics, and these are under your control. Manage and measure and report on things that you can control. All the other things are effectively the outcome of those inputs. The problem that a lot of companies are having is that they are managing for outputs, and that is again putting them under short-term pressure. And because also Spyros mentioned Paul Polson, one of the very first things that Paul Polson did when he took office at Unilever is that it's a very funny story, because he has a conference, a media conference, and he says to the audience, "I do not want you as my investors." These were his very, very first words. He says, "The majority of my investor base at the moment are traders. They are not investors. You are living for my next quarter results." And immediately he stopped quarterly earnings guidance, and others afterwards followed suit. The result of it is that there was a complete restructuring of the shareholder base of Unilever. And what that allowed Paul Polson and others who followed suit afterwards to do was to focus on inputs without having this short-term pressure of short-term oriented outputs. Yeah, that would be the only thing I would say.
Thank you. And thank you for, I feel like Jeff Bezos and Paul Pullman were on this panel now. So thank you. And for those of you who haven't, maybe weren't familiar with Unilever's sustainability work, I highly recommend checking out all the work that they've done, because it is quite impressive and they've been a leader in the space. So with that, Melina, I would love to, I know Melina, my colleague, has been monitoring the chat and kind of keeping track of some questions. So if there's maybe one or two, we would love to, transition to some breakout rooms as well for those of you who are willing to stay and connect with one another kind of as humans, if you will, after this discussion. But maybe we can get one or two questions from the chat box, Melina, just to tie everything up.
Sure thing. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you all for such an intriguing panel and conversation. Some great questions came through, and I'll group them in the interest of time. If the panelists and Spyros could touch on trends in specific sectors, specifically the agricultural sector and the tourism sector, that would be really great. Thank you.
Spyros, would you like to start?
Yes, I will go first because after that I really have to go. I actually saw a question that was mentioning the mass tourism as a model, and I have to apologize because I think I misused my wording. I meant when I said that after the 60s or so, we saw a mass development of tourism. This is what I meant. I did not mean that mass tourism was a thing that was positive in terms of sustainability for anything, because it wasn't. But what is now happening is that, of course, mass tourism will always happen. There will be mass tourism because we're talking, as I said before, in countries like ours, we're getting 20 to 30 million tourists a year. That is a lot, and this is not bound to change. But what can change is the way you approach it and what you offer to the people that are visiting a country. And if you incorporate in this the basic sustainability criteria, meaning that, for example, you can provide the food that you provide from local sources that are grown to the best practices, or even organic if you can. If you make sure that your buildings that you do build respect and are constructed with very high energy conservation standards and so on, you're mindful about the use of water resources, you're mindful about binding what you do to local culture and to the culture of people. And it's not, a thing apart that isolates the local population from what's happening. This can be a very, very important step. And I think that there's a very high percentage of visitors that want to see this. Not everybody wants to go to the mass tourism, all-inclusive things. I think there's more and more people that are much more aware of this. And this binds and blends very well with the agri-food sector, not only because the tourism sector is a very important user of the produce and the products that come out of the agri-food sector, but also because it is like a front. It's like the showcasing of products of any country, and so people that will come and will be able to taste in the breakfast the good products that you have in Greece, from the orange juices to olive oil to pitas to all these things. Then they will know how it's done. I mean, the Italians have done it a few decades before we did it, and now they export amazing quantities of very good products and very much labeled. Greece can probably have an equally good performance in that. And so I think that the two things blend together. And I'm very happy to see that this is part of the planning that we see from how the Green Deal thing will be used. And I'm sorry I have to go. I just want to leave you with a very big thanks and congratulations to all the speakers and to the very interesting questions. And we will be in touch, definitely. And please remember that you can find my email also through the organizers, but also in my presentation, and I'll be very happy to be in touch with you. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Spyros.
Thank you, Spyros. So I'm curious, Giorgos, I hope you don't mind if I actually tap you to help answer this question as well that Melina flagged, because I know Giorgos has been an advisor as well to Ecogenia, and it has some interesting ideas. Just recently participated on a Instagram live around ecotourism and this whole kind of new concept for Greece, and is excited about a particular region. So if you wouldn't mind speaking broadly about trends, but perhaps also plugging kind of this project that we're working on together, would be great.
Absolutely. Well, yes, I think that people in Greece realize more and more that the touristic model that exists needs to change. And I think there are many steps taken towards this direction, but many more should be taken. As Spyros mentioned, that it's not how many tourists visit Greece, but it's what is the value, the total value that a single that every tourist brings to the whole society of Greece, right? Because there are some externalities, but also there are some positive impacts. So we need to increase the positive impact and reduce the externalities, the negative externalities. Towards this direction, Ecogenia is planning a very interesting project which is focused on Dorida. Dorida is very close to Nafpaktos. For those that are know where is Nafpaktos, it is in central Greece. The project is about to develop a path of a network of paths, of trails. So Ecogenia will mobilize young people and some experts about trail development and will work with local people that already have an interest in developing this not just the trail network, but in general to increase sustainable tourism. Because Dorida is one of the most disadvantaged regions of Europe and of Greece, of course. People are old there. There are no big cities in this region. It is away from all the big centers. And it's a bit forgotten, you know, and we hope and we believe that this will really help this region do a bit better.
Thank you, Giorgos. And this is, I thought you were going to say this is something close to your heart, because it is a region that's also very close to
right. I forgot that. So yes, this is where I come from. Right.
Thank you for that. And maybe I wish we could continue this discussion longer. There's so much more to discuss, and panelists, you guys have been absolutely fantastic representing all these different perspectives. I feel like we could go on for more, but John, perhaps for the sake of time, if you would like to move into some breakout rooms, we can do that. But I wanted to thank the panelists. Thank you for this panel discussion, and emphasize, if any of you here are kind of feeling overwhelmed and feel like the burden of climate action and sustainability is on your shoulders, you have a community here, right? There's been at least over 40 people on this call interested in this topic, and emphasizing how important cross collaboration between our work is. So excited for more of these discussions, excited to help motivate and inspire and kind of, you know, collaborate across all of our work so that we can continue to do this work together.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
I would just like to say thank you for everyone. The panel and the range of perspective was great, and especially Mr. Kouvelis's initial presentation was very highly informative. Just a fascinating kind of path through Greece's history and its entrance into this interesting field. So thank you very much, and thank you to John, and thanks Alexandra for everything that you do always. And yes, I hope that people participate in the breakout rooms, and we should, you know, if people would like to, we should start that right away.
Sure. So basically we assign each panelist to a separate breakout room, and we're just going to automatically assign the participants to each of the breakout rooms. So in just a few minutes, if you get a prompt to join a breakout room, please go ahead and proceed in clicking yes, and then we can start.